Welcome to Complexity Made Simple. My name is Paul Allen, and before we get into today's video, well, I'm just going to remind you the 3 books that are on sale. Drink tea and read the paper. If you're a green belt and a black belt and you want simple instruction on how to apply your skill, design of experiments for 21st century engineers, and finally a statistical process control for small batch production. They are all available from lulu.com and the links are in the video below. Welcome to Complexity Made Simple. My name is Paul Allen, and the subject of today's newsletter, well, I'm going to answer an email that I've had from a client about doing MSA on his OEE system. So the question is, does he do an MSA? Or indeed, can he do an MSA on the OEE data? So the gentleman's name, I think you pronounce it Zelko, but I'm not absolutely certain. That's the gentleman's name. So this is a video specifically to answer your question. He said he's got an MSA system. An OEE system. People don't trust it. Do you do an MSA? What do you do? And he's also said, if I don't do an MSA, what would be my advice? So let's talk about whether you do an MSA on your OEE data. The point about your data, so you have data, okay? The point about your data is that it is always an estimate. Every data set you look at, doesn't matter where the data comes from, every data set is an estimate of what's going on. And what you should be asking yourself, and this is why we use statistics, this is why you need statistics in your company. One of the things you should be asking is, okay, is it a good estimate? Because if it's a good estimate, I don't have to do any work on it. I haven't got a problem there. I haven't got something I've got to fix. Okay, so the OEE data is an estimate of what's going on. And the question is it a good estimate? Now, what MSA is just one tool. It happens to be one tool that helps you to find out whether you have a good estimate. But it doesn't mean that it's the only tool to make sure your data can be trusted. And that's what we're asking here. Can the data be trusted? Now, I'm going to go through some things that I would do with OEE data. There is areas where you could do an MSA. There are areas where I wouldn't do an MSA, or indeed you can't do an MSA. So let me show you how I would start OEE. The first thing I would do, so one of my tools is just use my common sense. Okay, so, okay, we've got OEE data. And obviously one of the things you've got all the components, yeah. So you've got the uptime, you've got the performance data, you've got the quality data. Those 3 get multiplied together in order to create an OEE result. Now there's an easy way to check whether this is correct or not, and it's to work out the OEE value as a top line figure and compare it to the computer. So let me show you what I mean. What we're going to work out is the top line OEE without splitting it up. So the way to do this is very simple. You just take the speed of the line. So in other words, the standard speed that's being used in the OEE calculation. Now I'm going to assume that we have a product and we can make 1 per minute. All right, so we run the machine for an 8-hour shift. There are 480 working minutes available. So very simply, to achieve 100% OEE, I have to have produced 480 pieces. It's simple. I would have, to get 480 pieces, I would have been up 100% of the time. I would have run the machine at the standard speed without any delays or stoppages or setup time, and all the goods I made would all have been good parts, and therefore I ran for 480 minutes at 1 a minute, 100% OEE. Bang. That's it. That's the way your OEE works. Now, the first thing to say, if your OEE doesn't work like that, it isn't correct. So maybe the whole system should be thrown in the bin and you should start again and generate a proper OEE figure. But anyway, there's your 100%. Now, obviously, you can just work out at the end of the day what your OEE figure is. Because if you say, well, to get 100%, I need to have produced 480. What did I produce? So if you say, well, I produced, let's think of a figure, I'll halve that, 240. So let's say at the end of the shift, you actually produce 240 items. Well, it's very simple, isn't it? It's 50% OEE. So that's your top line figure. So why don't you just take the production figures and work out a top line figure? So in this case, I've worked out 50%. And then say, when I multiplied uptime, so when I took the pieces of the data, the uptime multiplied by the performance data, multiplied by the quality data, what did I get that day? Now let's say you got 48%. So your system says 48%, your top line calculation says 50%. That's probably going to be okay. Is it a good estimate? Yeah, it's a reasonable estimate of what's going on. All right, so if on the other hand, your top line says 50%, and when you look at your calculated OEE, it says 78%, you go, that ain't right. And then you look at where the error is. Okay, you look at where the error is, and then of course you start looking at the pieces. Was the uptime correct? Was the performance correct? Was the quality correct? So that's the first place to start. Just at a general level, is the overall number roughly correct? Is it a good estimate of what's going on? And that's a simple way to figure it out. Okay, so that's step one. Now then, if you decide that you've got this problem and you want to try and dig into where the problem is, let's talk about maybe where you could use an MSA first. The place where you might do an MSA is here, where the quality check is being done. So let's say this is automatic. So I'm going to suggest that you are producing, let's say you're producing a pot of yogurt. Yeah, you're producing a pot of yogurt, and the pot of yogurt must weigh 75 grams, and it's going over an automated weigh checker, and the weigh checker is knocking the underweights into a side container, which obviously is a defect. Now then, could I do a traditional MSA on the weigh checker? Yeah, absolutely. So I could get some standard static scales. I can take 10 pots of yogurt. I can measure the 10 pots of yogurt on the static scales twice. I can put the pots of yogurt across the weigh checker twice. And we've got a great MSA there And that works brilliantly. So it works at a piece level in your OEE data. You can definitely do it on the quality data. All right. The other one you could potentially look at, but it's not really an MSA, is the performance data. Now you mention the OEE server, so I'm assuming that you're talking about all of this data being collected automatically. So one of the things that will be automatic, you will be counting the number of parts going through the machinery or the weight going through the machinery, and you will be doing it automatically. Now again, you can do a check. I wouldn't call this an MSA, but you can certainly do a simple check that the counter is working properly. So for instance, what you could do is on a weekend or on a particular part of downtime, you could take 100 cans or 100 containers that the machine is counting. You could deliberately count 100, and then you literally go to the end of the machine and you just feed the empty cans across the sensor. You see if it counts 100. It's very simple. So again, is it an MSA? Well, you're checking to see if you're getting a good estimate. You're looking for errors in the system. Now, if you've got errors in just 100 cans and you produce 20,000 cans a day, there is a good chance you're going to have lots of problems, and therefore you don't have a good estimate. So maybe the performance, the individual componentry of the performance could be checked. I wouldn't think that the run speed would be wrong, for example. So if the machine is supposed to run at 100 and you're only running at 70, well, you don't need an MSA for the computer to know that that's wrong. So that shouldn't need checking. So you can do a full MSA here. You can do a partial check here. And then the other one that's a little bit questionable, automatic. Now, if it's automatic, the computer knows when the machine runs. So the actual uptime shouldn't be in question. The physical time shouldn't be in question. What might be in question is the reason why the machine was down. So somebody might say it's a mechanical fault. Another technician might have said, no, actually it's an electrical fault. Another technician might say, no, it's to do with the shape of the raw materials coming in. And you might have a difference about what the category of fault is. Okay, so there, again, is it an MSA? It's not an MSA, but what you should do is you should have clear standards about what the downtime codes are. And my advice to you, by the way, is to keep the downtime codes very, very simple. So for instance, the three that I mentioned, electrical faults, mechanical faults, raw material faults, keep it as simple as that, because then if you get a lot of mechanical faults, you can look at doing a project on improving that. If you get a lot of electrical faults, you can do a project on improving that. And once you're focusing on it, then you're going to collect a lot of detailed, involved data about the machine that you don't want to collect every day. If you're doing a project on something, you want to collect lots of fancy detail. But if you have a machine that's running beautifully, why collect lots of fancy detail that you never use? Yeah, so keep your downtime codes very simple. That will mean that you're unlikely to misallocate the downtime. You're likely to get the downtime allocation correct, and therefore this is likely to be a good estimate. The computer, the PLC, knows when the machine's running, so the uptime is going to be well calculated, I would have thought. The speed should be well calculated. Is the counters, are the electrical counters working properly? That's a simple practical check. Maybe you have a situation where you want to do an MSA on the quality check. Depends what the quality system actually is, but that one would probably be an area for a proper MSA. But the first thing to do is do a top line calculation. The maximum you can output for that product. Once you know that, how many did we actually output? That tells you what the OEE is for the day. And if your OEE is massively different to that, you know you have a problem. All right, so it's a practical check more than an MSA check. There is where you might do the MSA. But to me, OEE data doesn't really need an MSA, but you do need to get it right. You do need to get it right. Finally, one last point about getting a good estimate. I just want to say one thing about this. Your OEE data is designed to help you to identify your priorities for improvement. You should be improving constantly. Your OEE, by the way, should look like this. It should look terrible. It should be down in the 50, 40, 30%. So one of the things about OEE data is you should be constantly improving it. There should be constant projects going on to improve your OEE, because it's usually in the toilet. It's usually terrible. It's a very difficult measure to get to 100%. And therefore, you got to ask the question, I know I might have some error here, but does it matter? All right, so let's think about it like this, look. Let's say you've got an OEE of 50%, and this is your losses data. And the losses come from these three areas here. And when we look at this, it looks like this. Let's say that's quality, that's performance, that's uptime. Okay, now, if I did an MSA on this, is it really going to affect this number? Unless your measurement system is completely terrible and you can't tell good ones from bad ones, do you have a priority to improve here? Yes. And trying to make sure that the OEE data is correct probably isn't going to change that point of view. The same as if, you know, if uptime was the biggest problem. If uptime's your biggest problem, checking that the data's correct isn't going to help you solve that problem. Get in and solve the flipping problem. It's not going to change your point of view. Yeah, so if you're doing 30 changeovers a day and they all take 15 minutes, there's work to be done there. There's work to be done. So, you know, when I say a good estimate, the data should be giving you a good estimate of what's going on. It's a good estimate in relation to the decision you're trying to make. And normally with OEE data, the decision you're trying to make is, where is my priority for improvement? Because your OEE should always be awful. If your OEE is up at 95%, it is definitely wrong. Your OEE should be down around 50 or below, and therefore your next question is, where's my priority to improve? Once you've identified your priority to improve, start a project and get on and improve it. And that's what you should be doing. And quite honestly, in a lot of cases, even with error in your OEE data, it often doesn't change the decision you're about to make. I have a priority on my maintenance of my machinery. I have a priority on my setup time on my machinery. I have a priority on the quality of the goods coming off the machine. Doing an MSA often doesn't change that priority. So if it's not going to change your priority, stop worrying about the data and start worrying about improving the numbers. So thanks for the question, because you've provoked another video. You can see why I didn't reply to your email in full. I prefer to do this as a video. Hopefully, watch the video, see if I've answered your question. If you've got any more questions, just send me an email, give me a phone call. I'm happy to help you out. I'm happy to help you out in any way that I can. That goes for anybody else that's watching, by the way. I'm just happy to help all my clients to make more money in 2021, and boy do we need it right now.